Today I'd like to continue with the little talks I'm giving, sort of in honor of our current self-isolation, which prevents people from indulging in what I consider to be the primary activity of Tai Chi Chuan, which is stuff that you do with somebody else. For a lot of people, the form and stuff that you do while you're alone is the main thing. And in fact, I've been told by people, oh, I don't want to learn that other stuff where you like touch other people and things. I just want the really beautiful, profound dance, etc., etc. So there's a lot to do there, and I call this series of talks Tai Chi Chuan with Partners Gone. And so until we do have a partner, I sort of would like to continue with my little tips about what to me makes the form productive and interesting. And I put those two things together because it's my belief that if you're not interested in something, you can't really put enough attention on it for it ever to be productive. So I think one of the big mistakes that sometimes people make in teaching Tai Chi Chuan is attempting to simplify it in some way. It becomes less interesting when simplified. You just have to accept the fact that if people aren't interested in it, they are not going to ever learn it because it's a little too deep to just casually perform it every day. Now, there's there's what I consider to be almost humorous reversal that has taken place in the last few years, at least from what I've observed. Originally, Tai Chi Chuan, or originally the origin of Tai Chi Chuan, the sort of internal movements of the Shaolin Temple, which were from the waist up and married to kind of strong, powerful positions with the legs. These were, originated with Bodhidharma and gradually evolved to be effective fighting forms. And the original exercises of Bodhidharma were made to be completely done from the waist up. You were sitting in a lotus posture or something completely immovable. So there was no idea that there was anything else to be done with the legs. Now there's a saying that Tai Chi Chuan represents whole body movement. That's the way it's usually translated. Whenever they use the word movement, they're talking about internal movement. So whole body movement did not mean moving your whole body at once, like jumping, off of a pier or something. That's not what whole body movement means. What whole body movement means, it is extending the movements and the internal changes of the arms to the legs. So the legs follow the same rules of internal motion as the arms. This was whole body movement. And now, in other words, it was reformed from something that was completely upper body into something that was whole body. And now I see a tendency when people teach Tai Chi to say, well, you can practice the legs without the arms. And when you're doing the form, you can put your arms at your sides or hold them like this or whatever. But it's wrong to practice the arms without the legs. In fact, people look horrified when that's even suggested, which is kind of strange because, again, this sort of means we have to have a new campaign for whole body movement. Because this internal movement, the arms are not just these passive things that are dragged around by your legs. The arms are very active. And this activity can be expressed without the movement of the legs. In fact, when we do Tai Chi Chuan, we do a number of things which involve movements of different parts of the body which essentially cancel each other out in terms of external movement. This is particularly true when we turn the waist. Sometimes we will turn the waist in a certain way and move the arm in another way so that what actually it looks like is that the arm is not moving. It's not moving in space, but it's moving internally a great deal because its position in relationship to the body is changing. So it's real important that you understand that you should be just as active in the upper body as in the lower body. So I want to correct this right away, this idea that, again, I talked about the somatic condition before. And the somatic condition is very dependent on anything that blocks internal changes. So, of course, tension can block internal changes. So this is called Li. When they say in the classics to relax, they mean to not have Li, not have anything that impedes this. But just stagnancy, that is just passive relaxation, can also block internal changes. And this idea that you don't have any real active movement of the arms, but the legs are doing stuff and then the arms are just kind of being dragged around like this, this contradicts this whole concept. So please don't allow this strange problem to reverse itself. The problem where in the beginning it was internally active in the upper body and not in the lower body, and now it's internally active in the lower body and not in the upper body. Please understand, the meaning of whole body movement is everything moves. And what you really want is for every single muscle in the body to be engaged in even the simplest act. I mean, you can, even though I scratch my head, I want to feel like something's happening in the whole body when I scratch it. There's some kind of energy. Now, when this movement is reduced to smaller and smaller degrees, at a certain point, we start calling it energy, when it's just an energetic change going through the body. Jimin Ching was frequently asked by students when I was studying with him what the secret of this strange energy that seemed to flow over his body when he did the form. If you looked carefully at what Jimin Ching was doing, you saw that this look of energy was actually the result of very small internal changes taking place all the time in his body, and especially in his upper body. So I will pose it to you as a kind of homework. The idea that you should analyze every movement in the form and try to isolate the arms. In other words, try to figure out what the arms are doing with no movement of the waist whatsoever. And you'll find that this is extremely puzzling sometimes. And just this mere puzzlement that you will run into when trying to analyze this should be an indication to you that you actually don't know what you're doing when you do the form. That there's whole areas of the body that you're sort of depending upon to like make certain changes, and actually when you try to analyze those changes, you have no idea of what it really is. So it's not to say that when you become good at it, you're completely unconscious of this. Of course you are, because you're good at it. But now you may be unconscious of it because you're not good at it. So you have to make sure that the activity can take place before it becomes so habitual and so automatic that you're not consciously aware of it all the time. Tai Chi Chuan is kind of a long process of doing this. I like to call it a process of increasing gestalt combinations. You will learn some small things that you do, and those things you have to concentrate on very much. And then those small things are combined into larger actions, so that later, instead of thinking of the small things, you just think of the larger action. And the small things become automatic parts of them. This is what you should be cultivating when you do the form. And this, by the way, this process is extended. And later you take these larger actions and they become smaller increments or parts of an even larger action. So finally, you progress more and more until your thought is quite simplified. It's the result of an extremely complex process of analyzing what you're doing and becoming conscious of it. But the result is finally that everything happens automatically. If it doesn't do this, then it's really no good for fighting. So don't be surprised if when you try to analyze these arm movements from the form, that you become extremely puzzled and even frustrated. And in a later lecture, I will sort of give you the method of doing it when I can show you the leg movements and everything like that, because there's a kind of process by which you can accomplish this in the most efficient way. But for now, just take it as a form of homework and just say, okay, I'm going to take the form, and you can take any particular move and say, what exactly are my arms doing? I want to give you a brief example of what I mean by analyzing the movements of the arms and how counterintuitive it may be. One of the habitual changes that is made in Tai Chi Chuan is a change from a kind of horse stance like this to an arrow stance like this. And this involves a 45-degree angle turn of the body. Now, when doing this, the arms are frequently described, especially like in the first movement, after you've made, say, ward off left, and then they describe it sort of hanging in the air while you turn the waist, something like that. This may be a descriptive, way of talking about them, but it has nothing to do with what you're actually doing in your body, because your arms don't hang in the air. You can't just let go of them and then move the body, they just stay there. You are unconsciously or consciously doing something. So the way you analyze this kind of movement is you say, okay, here's the movement I'm used to doing. Here's my ward off left, and now here's my change to the arrow stance. So you say, well, now, what would happen if I did this and then didn't do anything with my arms and just did with the legs, like this? Now you say, well, I have to make a certain adjustment here, this way. And now you realize, well, actually what you had to do was do this at the same time that you did that. And this is just as active a movement with the upper body as you're making with the lower body. So the idea that you shouldn't have any kind of consciousness of upper body changes is really contradictory to what you need to do to be conscious. So again, you'll make the first movement, and now saying, okay, what was that movement that I remember doing? Oh, something like this. And then this, then you end up at the right place. So what you should do is do that sort of back and forth a few times until finally you say, well, okay, I'll just do this while I'm doing this. And the result will be this. Then you become extremely conscious of the actual movements of the muscles that are involved in what you do. Now, if you try to apply this idea to all the movements in succession, you will find it extremely enlightening.